Okay, hi, my name's Andrew Brown. I'm a pharmacist by trade, but I'm a clinical informatician here at the Bennett Institute. I'm here today with my colleagues who are also clinical informaticians and also pharmacists, and we want to give you a demonstration of the main features on the OpenPrescribing and the OpenPrescribing hospitals websites. So to be clear, they are separate websites, but they share common features in that they both track medicines data across England, they identify trends and variation between organizations, and they have a shared ethos of open access, plenty of transparency, and zero fees. The main difference lies in the fact that they use different data sets, with OpenPrescribing reflecting GP practice data, whilst OpenPrescribing hospitals reflects secondary care data. So let's start with a closer look at OpenPrescribing, the GP practice version. And we are moving into a live internet demo at this point, so anything could happen, but bear with me as we hope this will give you the best sense of how things work. So from the home page here, the first thing I would like to show you is the Analyze tool, and that can be accessed from the top menu bar here. Now from this page, what we can do, we can build a search for any drug or group of drugs that you could imagine. Now, I'm from the Northeast, so I feel I've got license to use the Northeast as a bit of an example here today. And one of the things we're doing there is reviewing the formulary status of melatonin. So we might want to search for some information about melatonin. So we can just go to this search bar here and start typing in melatonin. And straight away, because it's linked with the underlying BNF structure, it's prompting us with relevant matches. I'm going to select melatonin at the chemical level, because that will then include all products containing melatonin. And then the next question we can think about is, do we want our data to have a denominator? By default, that is set as no denominator. So if you leave it at that, you'll just get like a raw frequency count as your output, which is fine. But for today, I would quite like to use total list size, as that will at least allow me to make some broad comparisons between organizations of different population sizes. Next, we can think about the granularity that we want to see our data at. So that can range from quite focused practice level data all the way through to much more strategic regional data. I'm going to choose ICB as an example today. And we also have the option to highlight a particular ICB in the data if we want to. So I can do that here. I'll just pick on the Northeast as an example again. And now we have all of our search parameters locked in place. What we can do is click Show Me the Data, and immediately we get our visualizations returned to us. The first one being a bar chart, which shows us the current prescribing rate of melatonin in each ICB across England. That's obviously useful if you want to do a bit of benchmarking and comparison between organizations. Alternatively, we could see the same data as a time series going back over the last 5 years. And that's helpful if you want to see, is prescribing growing, shrinking, or is there any seasonality in the data? There is even a map view, which can help you pick out any geographical patterns or clusters. I should point out that by default, all of the data is shown as items. Broadly speaking, items can be thought of as similar to the number of prescriptions dispensed. You also have the option to switch between spending or items to get two different views on the data. Another thing you can do, you can download a CSV file at any point, and obviously you can take that into your own data processing software and make your own custom analyses or graphics. Or if you just want to quickly share your analysis with somebody else, you can copy the hyperlink at the top, share that with a friend, and they will immediately get taken to the exact same search and results that you've just constructed. Another interesting thing you can do on this page is you could use a drug group as a denominator. So if we just reset our search a little bit, and instead of melatonin, let's say we wanted to search for a medication called vortioxetine, which is an antidepressant medication that is generally reserved for second or third line use. And what we could then do is put that over a denominator of the BNF section for all antidepressant medication. Like that. Then, when we refresh our data, what we will get is a chart that shows us the proportion of all antidepressants which are prescribed as vortioxetine. And that can be a really useful insight if you're trying to understand a bit about to what extent your expectations around first, second, or third line prescribing match up with reality. Okay, the next thing I'd like to show you is the dashboards. So again, they can be accessed from the top menu bar here. And again, you've got those familiar granularities to choose from, whichever is most relevant to you. I'm going to pick ICB, and again, the Northeast and Cumbria as an example today. And then we get through to this like landing page for the ICB, which has lots of interesting information on there, but often one of the things that people are most interested in are the standard measures. So we can get to them by clicking here. And once they load up, what we have is a list of pre-built measures, which we have designed at OpenPrescribing because we think they reflect things that will be of national interest to people. And we're regularly scanning the latest clinical guidelines and policies to make sure the selection on offer here is up to date and relevant for you. So all of these measures are presented as decile charts. I'm just going to try and zoom in carefully on one. Yeah, so they're all decile charts. So what we have here, we have the national median plotted as the bold dashed blue line. And then around that, we have national decile boundaries, this or the other blue lines. And then the red line is, of course, your selected organization. So in this example, we can see the red line is above the top national decile boundary. So it's telling us that this organization is amongst the 10% of highest scorers on that measure. In general, we structure our measures at OpenPrescribing so that lower values reflect better performance. However, there is a caveat to that in that that's not always true for all measures. There's definitely some measures where it's a bit ambiguous whether lower is truly better. Nonetheless, what this allows us to do is sort the measures on the page so that you'll see the measures on which you have the greatest opportunity for improvement right at the top of the page to help you prioritize. The purpose of all this is to help organizations identify where they are outliers and maybe prompt them to do a bit of self-reflection on why that is it a problem they need to do something about, or actually can they justify why they're an outlier? All of our measures are also categorized in different ways. So let's say, for example, we wanted to know a little bit more about opioids in particular. We could click here, and then we would get all the measures relating to opioids straight away. Let's just look at the top one as a bit more of an example. So it's telling us about the rate of high-dose opioid prescribing. So that's derived by looking at the strength and formulation of the opioid prescribed. And there's all sorts of ways we can explore that measure a bit further. One interesting way is to drill down into the data, and we can do that by clicking here to split the measure into charts for individual sublocations. So when we do that, what we get is like a series of mini charts for all the sublocations contained within the originally selected ICB. And we can see there's quite a lot of variation between those sublocations. They're not all high. Some of them are actually quite low. And what we could do, if we wanted to, we could click into any of those sublocations further and drill all the way down to GP practice level and see which GP practices are high on the measure. And at that point, that's quite a focused insight. Let's not do that now, though. Instead, let's break the score down into individual drug presentations by clicking here. And when we do that, what we get is a list of all the high-dose opioids that are prescribed in that particular area. And that can be really useful context, because if we find it was mainly transdermal opioids, that might prompt us to take a slightly different approach than if it was mainly oral opioids. I think the last thing I'd like to show you on the dashboards is if we just flick back to the landing page for the ICB and scroll down slightly, there is a text box here where you can insert your email address to subscribe for updates. And we have thousands of subscribers, and we get feedback from lots of them that they find these updates really, really helpful. So if you do have an interest in data about a particular organization, I highly, highly recommend you do subscribe. You can do that at various levels. It could be an ICB, a practice, a PCN, or whatever. What happens is if you subscribe, you will then get updates about, you'll get an email from us once every month, which will say, these are the measures on which your organization is most an outlier, And also, these are the measures on which your organization has changed the most. Speaking of detecting change in measures, that is another tool we have, which my colleague Caroline is going to tell you a bit about now.
Right, so to get to the improvement radar, you just need to get to the top menu bar, and it's under the trends option. And it's this very bottom one over there. And when you click on that, it takes you to the tool, which it basically identifies any sub-ICB locations that have had really good improvements in any of our open prescribing measures. And if you're interested in knowing exactly what criteria the tool is using to identify those improvements, we've written about that there. But to get using the tool, I would recommend just clicking on the table of contents. You can browse through the measures to find any that's of interest to you. And for this particular demonstration, we'll look at blood glucose testing strips not included in NHS England commissioning recommendations. And when you click on that, you can see the tool has identified 5 organizations which have had significant improvement. And you can just look through those just to see which organizations they were. But something that's really interesting is the tool is able to detect very different types of changes, so changes done over a few years or even months. So for NHS Thurrock here, you can see that they started off as being one of the highest prescribers, and they've made a lot of changes, but it was done quite over a few years, and they're now sort of below average. But in contrast, you've got something like NHS Bolton here, where, yeah, they were also one of the higher-end prescribers, and they were a bit later on adopting changes. But when they did, it was done over a very short period of time, so within months. So it's quite interesting to see that you can get that level of detail by looking at this tool. So the next tool I'm going to show you, I'll just head back to the home page, is the drug tariff and price concession tool. And again, you can get to that from the trends option at the top over there, and it's the second one from the bottom. And what this tool does, it shows us the NHS reimbursement prices for any drug that's prescribable on the NHS over the last 10 years. And it also shows changes in drug categories. I'm going to look at apixaban 5 milligrams as an example. And when I click on the chart, update chart, it should show me what the price trends have been like over the last 10 years. So here we go. And you can see that the price was steady for many years. It was in category C of the drug tariff, which means it was being reimbursed at the brand listed price. And then something interesting happens. Apixaban goes off patent, generics become available, and it moves to category M, which is illustrated by the dashed lines there, and the price drops quite a lot. And then something else interesting happens. There's this green spike over there, shows there was a price concession, and that means that there was a temporary reimbursement in NHS to community pharmacies over that period of time. And that usually happens when pharmacies are unable to source the drug at the listed price. And then things seem to have gone stable for now anyway. But like I said, you can search for this type of information for any drug you're interested in. Now, we do have other tools that you might find interesting, but unfortunately, there isn't time to go through them in this demonstration. But we do have drop-in sessions later on that you can come in and ask us to show you more. You might be interested in seeing our API tool, which you can use for bulk data extracts. There's also the GM+D browser, which you can use for browsing through drug categories, looking at NHS drug dictionary codes and definitions. And there's also a price per unit tool, which you can use to identify expensive drugs and potential alternatives. So like I said, come see us later if you're interested in knowing more. And I'll now hand over to Chris to do a hospital demonstration.
Right, morning everyone. So I'm Chris, again, clinical informatician at the Bennett Institute. So today I'm going to be talking about OpenPrescribing hospitals, our newest project. I think you've heard quite a bit about it yesterday, but I'm going to show you through. So to get to the page of OpenPrescribing hospitals, there's a big blue button down here, Find a Hospital, so you can click through that. It loads, good. And here's the URL as well, so hospitals.openprescribing.net, so you can go to it straight from there. So I'm going to work my way through the three main tools that we've got today and give you a bit of insight into why they're there and what they do. So we'll start with the submission history. We click through here. So submission history is an important tool, we think, to find out a bit more about what data is available through OpenPrescribing and through the secondary care medicine data set. So again, you heard about the secondary care medicine data set yesterday, and this is something that's generated by RxInfo. So RxInfo require individual trusts to submit data on their medicine usage each month to form part of this data set. We know pretty consistently this happens, so most trusts submit data every single month consistently. But we also know there's a few quirks in the data, so there's a few quirks in what is submitted to this data set, and we also know there are a few gaps. And when you're doing research or when you're drawing any conclusions from any data and looking at results, it's really important to know where the gaps are and what might affect your results. So we can use this trust here as an example, Birmingham Women's and Children's NHS Foundation Trust. So this is the one that appears at the top. So here you can see the chart which shows their submission history. It's quite a visual snapshot, but hopefully that's quite a quick way to understand what's happening. So you'll see the blue lines here represent data submissions. So each blue line represents a submission for that month. So you can see there's many, many, many blue bars here. So data has been submitted pretty consistently for this trust over the years. The dark blue lines represent what we call finalized data, so that is fixed data. The blue lines here are from this current financial year, so they are termed provisional data, part of a provisional data set, so they are still subject to potential resubmissions or adjustments before or at the end of the financial year. So they might change, most of them don't, but they could change. You can see the heights of the lines are fairly consistent over time. So the heights show how many unique products were submitted that month. We expect most trusts are using the same number of products most months. It might slightly change depending on, they didn't have a patient on that drug that month. But most of the time you would expect that to be fairly stable, and we can see it is. But then here we see for this trust, so these last, I don't know if you can, yeah, it's a bit clearer on there. So there's 4 red lines here, so 4 red bars. So this trust is missing data for the last 4 months in the SCMD. So there's reasons for this. The most common pattern we're seeing is when trusts are moving over to new electronic prescribing records. We think this trust is in the process of that. So it's just important to be aware that for now that's missing. It could become filled in later when the data becomes finalized, so it might fill in later, but it's very important to be aware that that gap exists in the data set now. So for an example, if you were looking at prescribing of children's medicines across different regions in the country, you might, if you were looking at results, you might find a sudden drop from June 2025 onwards in the Midlands region. And it's important not to leap to the conclusion that there's been a change in prescribing. It's about knowing that there is this gap there, and that might be affecting your results. So that's what we launched with first, because we thought actually that's probably the most important thing you're aware of before you start getting too deep into drawing conclusions and looking too deep at the data. And then we'll move on to, go from the home page, move on to measures. So you've heard from Andrew what measures are. So we've adopted them from OpenPrescribing for primary care. So there are pre-built analyses that show prescribing patterns for things that are important based on things like national guidelines and recommendations and policies. We've got 13 measures on the site at the moment. They range from primary care things that we sort of mirror from OpenPrescribing primary care. So things like the best value DOACs, we show similar, we just show the hospital side of the data compared to what's in the primary care data. We also have a few hospital-specific measures here. So these are the anti-cancer drug treatments down here at the bottom, which are hospital-specific medications, and there just wouldn't be use in primary care. We've got a number of other measures in development as well, and we're always looking for suggestions. So if there's anything you think of today, you hear about what we're talking about, and you think, oh, that would be interesting to look at, do let us know, because we're very happy to hear submissions from everyone and try and build things if they work. So I'm going to talk you through a measure today. We've only got time for one, but we're going to look at this one here. So this is the uptake of PHESGO measure here. And this was, again, a user submitted this suggestion, said this is an interesting thing to look at. So we built it based on their feedback and their suggestions. Again, with the open prescribing hospitals measures, we have, it's a little bit more out of the way, but we have a why does it matter section here explaining why this is important. We link to things like national guidelines to tell you. Very briefly for this, I will try and explain in as few words as possible, but these are two drugs that are used in the treatment of breast cancer. Historically, the product used needs to be given as an intravenous infusion, which took about 2.5 hours to give. So patients had to go in, sit there for 2.5 hours while that drug was infused into them. Took up chair time, took up nursing time. Then this new product, Phesgo, contains these two drugs as a single injection, can be given in about 8 minutes. So it means that patients can go in, receive their treatment, be out of hospital within much, much shorter period of time. So it's much better for patients. It frees up time for them. It means they can be in and out quickly. Also frees up nursing time as well. It means they don't have to sit there supervising patients, and potentially it means they can have more throughput, more treatments for patients. If we scroll up here, we can see we can see broadly how uptake has happened across the NHS and across secondary care trusts. So again, we show median line here, and then we show the percentile, so the sort of spread in the shaded blue areas. So you can see this median line really rapidly rises. Oops, sorry, zoomed in too quickly there. But you can see this red line shoots up really rapidly, which shows there was pretty rapid uptake across a large number of NHS trusts. So people were ready to go, and they went quite quickly. You can also have a look at individual hospitals. So if you're interested in an individual hospital or you're interested in comparing hospitals, you can type them in. So I'm going to look at just one today, but this is the Christie, which is a large cancer trust in Manchester area. And you can see they were super ready to go. So they were a very early adopter. They rose from 0 usage basically to almost 100% use within a month as soon as the product became available. I think they probably were possibly part of the trials and things because there is some early usage. So they were obviously already familiar with it, but you can see how one trust has adopted it quite quickly, and then you can add your own trust in potentially, or trusts you're interested in, and see are they following a similar pattern, are they lagging behind, and think then about the reasons why there might be differences across trusts. There was lots of other little bits and pieces, so you can look at different regional trends, different ICB trends as well in here. So there's lots to see, but that's a very brief look at the measures. And then the last main tool I'll talk you through today is Analyze. So again, this is where you can look at your own products or your own area of interest. Again, I'm going to use something that's been shared with us by a user. So this user was interested, or they were writing guidelines about anticoagulants, so blood thinning injections and the use about how to use them in their hospital. So there's 3 main blood thinning injections that are used across the NHS. So there's enoxaparin. I'm going to type these in as we go. Dalteparin. Do you need to remember how to spell all these? And tinzaparin. So there's 3 different ones that are in pretty widespread use across the NHS. Most trusts pick one as their preferred option. So it's unlikely a trust will be using lots of all 3. It's most likely individual trusts will be using one of the 3. But it's interesting to know which one is the most popular, and potentially which trusts are using which. So we can select all 3 products as part of our analysis. So this selects everything, also all the different enoxaparin products, all the different dalteparin products, all the different tinzaparin products. We're not interested in an individual trust here, we're just interested in everything. So if we click Run Analysis, does take a couple of seconds to run on this because it's calculating quite a lot, different views and different presentations. And then we scroll down here. So today we're interested just specifically in the product groups because that's what we want to see, but there's lots of other options to see. But really quickly from this measure, from very little input, you can produce a chart that shows this trend and the variation across the trusts about which one is used most. So here we can see the dark green line at the top is enoxaparin. So we can see this is the most used in terms of if we're looking at DDDs, defined daily doses. And we can see the trend is there's an increase in that over time, over recent years. The middle line is dalteparin, and we can see that's on the decline. So perhaps more people are switching over to enoxaparin. And then down here at the bottom, we can see tinzaparin use is lower and fairly stable. So a very, very quick snapshot of something you can find out really quickly using open prescribing hospitals just by selecting the products and selecting the right chart. Very briefly, there's just lots of other tools and bits and pieces, like with OpenPrescribing, that we don't have time to talk you through this morning, but we've got much more time later this afternoon and later on this morning. So we've got our blog and our FAQ here. So we've got lots of information about what the data is, what it's showing, how to use it. We also have our email alerts here. So much like in OpenPrescribing, you can sign up to our email alerts. We'll keep you updated. We'll let you know when new data is available as new tools and features come out. Fine, so that's it. Yeah, so if you've got anything you want to hear about, if you want to see more analyses, you've got more suggestions, you've got more questions, please do come and find us later. Thanks.